Okay, well, let's jump in. Let's go ahead and get started today. By all means, feel free, um, everybody, to jump in as we're talking about topics here. Our main topic for conversation today is change management and the communications that go along with that. So this is mostly a non-technical conversation. It's about how we communicate the changes that are going on in our world. And really, that's true whether your world is the technical one or not, right? Many of our customers, many of the people we see on our call are from the technology part of their organizations, but some are not, right? We've got some from learning and development, we've got some from communications, um, lots of different ways this could be relevant, right? But really, all of us have change. We all have things that we have to manage and communicate to it. So that's our topic for today, to talk about how we can be successful with those things. Rocky Johnson is here with us. It's going to talk about a specific example that we're working on with them at the moment, what lessons they've learned and what we can learn from that. But we encourage all of you to feel free to join in and talk here. This is a topic that all of us have faced, maybe with varying degrees of success. So if you have challenges, pain points, or strategic thoughts that you'd like to share, please feel free to join in. So let's get started here. I am going to jump to this. Just change and progress are not the same thing, right? Progress requires change, but not all change is progress. Is kind of a common anonymous quote we've gotten from lots of places. But the idea here is that, from Robert Kennedy, progress is a nice word, but change is the motivator, and change has its enemies. Isn't that the case? Similar to this one is this one. The difference between change and progress is that progress is your idea, change is someone else's, right? I remember that from my younger years. Somebody shared that one with me. But that really is true, right? Many times we have to impose a change, whether that's a technology change or a process change or a leadership change or a compliance change or whatever those things are. We have to communicate them. Many times to the audience, I'll refrain from calling them the victims of the change, right? That is hard. It's difficult. And that's where the phrase change fatigue comes from with it, right? As we get an increasing treadmill of changes that happen, and this feeling that's encapsulated by this quote really builds up and snowballs. So change management communications is a big deal. The last quote on here, I like this one a lot. I think it's especially well suited to the world of business and technology, right? Some of the other quotes could be applied to any part of the human experience, but this idea of the art of progress is to preserve order amid change and to preserve change amid order. I come from a technology background myself, and my observation is that in the technical world, we do quite a good job with the second half of that, right? Our training is very much about that. We own those changes. We believe in the value of those changes. So we are preserving change, right? We are looking for opportunities to improve, to make progress, all of those things. Some of it is thrust upon us as well, right? The trend of agile software development, all the as a service things that have happened in the world too, as things move to the cloud. That idea of releasing early and often, there's constant changes happening, right? And the pace is accelerating rather than stabilizing, right? So we do a good job with the second half of that in technology. The first half is maybe not our strong suit. Okay? Do we have anybody on the call that has a specific expertise or a background or education in change management? Anybody there? If you're not able to unmute or not comfortable doing that, you can use the Q&A tool in here as well. You can communicate with us that way. What about you, Asif? You have a background on change management at all? So that's really an important question, because the preserving order amid the change is really not a technology problem, right? the exact same happens in all changes, whether that's technology or the business world or whatever it is. So whether you get new leadership, reorgs that happen in corporations and all the changes that come along with that, acquisitions and mergers, new business models, changing regulatory conditions in your industry, all those types of changes all have a tendency to create some chaos, right? So there is a need to preserve the order while the changes are happening. So really it's about humans more than it is about the technology. But whether you have any background in this or not, this is a great resource to use. So the Association of Change Management Professionals has a website, acnp.org, that I would recommend. We're not affiliated with them in any way. They have not endorsed us or anything. I don't want to create that kind of an impression. I am just trying to share this as a helpful resource. Many of us that sit in a seat like mine, right, or come from a background similar to mine, don't have a background in change management. We've had to figure it out by Braille as we go along, right? And that can be a challenge. In particular, there is a white paper on this site that is really useful. I've created a bit.ly link because I thought it would be a little bit easier for you to write down if you're inclined to do so. The real link is long, but this might be a little easier for you. If you just search for this title, this is the name of the white paper, and it's from this site, you can find it that way pretty quickly too. But this is a really useful one. It is about the concepts, about the theory, about the strategy of change communication. So it's really not a technical document at all, but I think that's the point, right? The things that are not the technical pieces is what many of us struggle with. We do have some people on the call that are not from a technical background. But even in those cases, if your background is in something else, if it's in HR or communications or, well, maybe not communications, HR or learning and development or one of those, the communications piece may not come as naturally. It may not already be our thought patterns. So what we're going to do today is we're going to share a few highlights from that white paper that may help you. And then we're going to talk with Rocky a bit about a real life change they're going through and what that can help us with. So these concepts, I'm not going to read all the questions to you. I always love that when somebody does a presentation and then they read all the slides to me. Right? This is really just as a reference. We're going to share this afterwards when we send out an email following. We're going to share a link to the white paper and a printout from this PDF or a PDF printout from this presentation, so you can have this too. But the idea here of this graphic, this infographic, is a change narrative, right? The idea is you have to ask yourself the questions that your audience is likely to have. If the change is a technical one, the audience is your end users, right? It's not so much the people that are creating or managing the system, it's the people that use it. Those are the ones that you have to communicate with the most. Doesn't mean you don't communicate with content owners. You clearly do need to do that. But don't forget to look at it from the perspective of your end users. And they give you some examples here of what that narrative is, what questions are relevant based on where you are in the cycle of that change and how much you know about it at that point. A lot of times my background's a technical one, so I think of a migration project or a launch project somewhere where we're building a new intranet and it's launching on a given date, and there's going to be all these changes that happen for the users at the end. But if your background is more HR or learning and development or something like that, the same things apply. Any examples anybody's got in their mind of a change you're doing that's not a technical one, where these kind of questions come into play? It's a quiet day. Again, I'll do the unmute choice again in case somebody joined us after I did that before. Okay. Let's move on then. The highlights to it, they really talked about 7 different I don't know if we call them steps or not, but 7 different methods, 7 different actions that need to be taken as part of a change communication strategy. And that's what this infographic is talking about. The white paper spends a fair amount of time on each one of these. We don't have that kind of time today, right? We're trying to do this, hit the highlights of this to look and see if we can illuminate what's especially helpful for us if you are one that's managing changes and aren't used to the communication piece. So the first part is the planning. I loved a quote from the white paper. It says, "Doubt travels very fast. It fertilizes the soil of inaction. It fertilizes workarounds. It fertilizes cynicism." Isn't that true? Haven't we seen that? Whether you're talking about a reorg that's happened because new executives have come into the organization, there's lots of doubt that gets created from that, and doubt paralyzes people, or it causes people to work around the new structure that's coming in place, or it creates this cynicism, that makes it difficult for people to accept the change and ultimately benefit from it, right? Because any change we're doing, the idea is that it will benefit. It wasn't done just to make things harder. But how do you get by that? Well, we have to think about the question of why a change is happening. Right? People don't understand why it's happening. They're not very likely to comply with it, at least not effectively. Therefore, they disengage. They get that change fatigue to things. If they're convinced of why something is important, they have some ownership in it. They have some buy-in and better engagement. So a big part of that is just planning the change out and thinking about that messaging. Second part of that is inspiring movement. So the idea is once you plan the change and you have the reasons why and your kind of overall strategy for it, the inspiring movement is translating that into something that's relatable and understandable for people, whether it's from the executive level in the boardroom all the way to the lunchroom, the cafeteria, so that they can understand what's going to happen, why it's happening now, and what are the consequences if we don't do these things. Some way of translating that to people is really important. It's that idea, that interrogative method we talked about in the last slide. So third is connecting the dots. Again, once you've translated the terms, connecting the dots is where you put things in context. Help people make sense out of the change that's happening. So being able to answer those questions of where are we going, why are we going, what's it going to mean for me, right? One of the proverbial things that I know Susan Hanley talks about in the adoption industry. We see her a lot at technical conferences and things talking about some of these same things. She talks about that radio station that's always playing in everybody's head, WIIFM, what's in it for me, right? That we have to be able to do that, to connect the dots, to help them understand not just the big picture, but the short term, the next steps, the logistics of what do I do differently than what I did before. So that's the three, the connecting the dots here. Number 4 is identifying and mitigating the resistance. So you have to understand why people might resist it and why the change is a good thing for them so that you can communicate that to them. Step number 5, creating dialogue. Dialogue's a difficult thing to have sometimes, and it's more than just digital communications, right? It's more than an email. It's more than banners and auto-loaded help items and walkthroughs and things like that. It's actually getting feedback the other way. It's being able to hear how things are going and therefore being able to adapt not only what you're doing about the change itself, but adapt your communications to make them more successful, to communicate not just what's happening, but the whys and the how to be successful within them. One thing we found an example of this is the idea of having office hours. We started doing that with you guys, right? You see it on our support site. There's a button at the top for office hours. And the idea is you can just drop by. Usually when people come there, they have a specific question. They're trying to do something. They need some guidance. They're not sure if something's broken or if they just don't understand it, or just some help in solving a business problem. But office hours, if you start doing similar things for the audience of your changes that are happening, if you start creating times when people can approach informally, it gives you that opportunity to just listen Sometimes those challenges, those problems they're asking about that you're giving them a resolution for, therefore inform your communications going forward. And sometimes they don't even have one of those. They have complaints about it. But it's good to hear those too, because they help us make the change and the communication better to help address those kind of questions and complaints. I know we have an example of that with Rocky when we start talking a little bit later with that. I remember some of those questions that were coming up all the time, questions or complaints about the new sites, right? So that's the creating dialogue. 6 is sharing information. The idea here is that communication is a process, not an event. So a single email that this is happening is not usually enough. That's not a communication plan. We can't assume people know. People have to hear about what's happening over and over in different places in different ways because they don't absorb it all at once. Right? In the example of a site migration, most people, their job is not revolving all around this site and managing this site and all of that. Their job is to do finance or to do policy work or to do marketing or something like that. So they have to hear these things. If we want those messages to sink in, they need to hear it more than one way, more than one place, so that they begin to get the essentials from it and they feel equipped and comfortable with the changes that's happening. It won't be on their radar, so to speak, unless we help it be there. And then 7, assessing and correcting course in real time. That's what all this information we get from the resistance, from the dialogue, from sharing information, all that helps us to continually refine the communications so that they have more and more the effect we're looking for. Any thoughts or questions on any one of these with them? Examples you've seen where this was difficult, or things you've done along the way, examples that have helped, something you might want to share with the group? Anybody? No pressure, but I want you to realize it's welcome. We prefer it when there's more than one voice. Okay, no pressure. Let's move to an example. So Rocky, we'd encourage you to go ahead and unmute. If you're comfortable turning on your webcam, that's great. But let's talk a little bit about your change. There he is. Welcome, Rocky. Good to have you with us. You're dealing with the change right now, right? Talk a little bit about that, the SharePoint migration, right? You're moving from a bunch of sites that were hosted within your network to ones that are hosted in the cloud and SharePoint Online. Can you talk a little bit about the scale of this change, a little bit about the scenario?
Sure. So we are an organization of approximately 150 plus rehab hospitals. These are hospitals that when you have something like maybe a hip replacement or a stroke, after you leave the acute care hospital, you come to our hospital for a week or two or even longer of rehabilitation. You know, it's a proper hospital, just one where we focus on therapy. And we have approximately 40,000 users. About 30,000 of those are clinical in nature. So not knowledge workers, not administrative folks, but people who are first and foremost tending to the patient. And we have just recently started moving from on-prem SharePoint and on-prem many things really to M365. And that's been a really big change for us, and one that I think particularly challenging for us because most of our users are not technical in nature, at least not with regard to SharePoint or Outlook or knowledge worker type applications. So making this kind of change on them has been a real struggle for us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Very bright people in that kind of a field, right? Very skilled, very bright people, but like you said, not information workers. Their role is not sitting at a desk getting comfortable with SharePoint and Planner and Teams and all that. They're hands-on with people doing that. So changes are harder in a situation like that, especially with such a high percentage of that type of worker in your industry. What are the advantages you see with the change you're trying to do? Right, because that's one of the things we were talking about in our non-technical stuff here is identifying what are the advantages, what's in it for me, for those users. What do you think?
So I think there are many. Again, you have to consider that most of these users, they want to spend as little time on the computer as possible. And that might be, most of the time it's maybe they're entering something in the EMR, the medical record application, where they're trying to spend as little time as possible there. So what we've tried to do is focus on the advantages of moving to M365. So these are, and sometimes these are little things like co-authoring. Beforehand, they might have put out a spreadsheet. No, I can't edit it because it's locked by this other user, and so that's very frustrating for them because again, they're trying to get that done, and they want to get back to what I call their real job, which is sending to the patient. And so, focusing on things like that, or focusing things on like a version history, where if they they don't have to call ITG to get a file restored, because beforehand we were on file shares for most of them, so we moved file shares to 365. And so to be able to take advantage of just little things like search and version history and co-authoring, and so given how little they use these applications, or how little they try to use them, we just want to focus on the tiny gain or the small gains they get from being able to do that. And there are, of course, many more. Those are just the ones that come to the front of my mind, but just trying to show them how, yes, this has changed, but there are advantages, and it's going to be uncomfortable for a little while as you get to see where this button moved over here, and this is sort of different than what it used to be. But focus on all these extra things that are going to make your life just a little bit better. And of course, that's not to mention the help button that shows up on the right-hand side of the screen now. I won't go into that, but that's really, really cool too.
Shameless plug, shameless plug. It's okay. It's a friendly audience, right? So yeah, that's good. Very helpful to think through those benefits, because those are things, they guide what it is you need to tell people along the line, right? To get their attention and to do that. So what challenges have you found communicating with your audience?
So the biggest challenge, of course, is, as you said, emails, miss more than they hit. I think so. You can't just do that. You have to be multi-pronged, but it's really getting this information in front of the user. The amount of time that you get from them is very, very small, whether they want to participate or not, because again, their real job is not focusing on the thing that you just sent out. It's focusing on taking care of the patient. And that's really where we want them to be. We don't want to take up their time. So we want to present as much as we can in a short, something that's easy for them to digest. And that's where again, I'm not sure if this is what preaching to the choir here, but having that in context help, was something that we saw as a really good opportunity to help them do that. And so we have to, so now we have to make them aware of it, because they probably weren't aware of it beforehand. So they need to be aware. It needs to have value for them. So just clicking on the help button and then seeing all the help items, if they don't find something they're looking for, and usually if they don't find it kind of quickly, then that sort of gets pushed to the side again, and they don't really consider that as a source anymore. So the challenge is getting it in front of them, getting a win, if you will, something that benefits them, that will keep them coming back, and then making that the source, the thing that they look for when they go, if they need help, instead of just this thing that pops up on the side that they now ignore because it didn't answer their question before. So I think those are we're right now in the very beginning parts of that. We've pushed it out to say, what, 15 hospitals or so, when we're actively trying to find, because we knew we would uncover some things that we could turn into help items, some challenges that they face as we go through this rollout. So we're trying to actively identify those, get those published in the help items, so that for those hospitals that have already migrated, or the ones that are coming along, will benefit from all the past experiences that we've had. And so again, the challenge is getting it in front of them, but also making sure that we're providing that value for them and wanting them, or keeping them coming back, because they'll look for that stuff in the future.
Yeah, and I think you highlighted a really important challenge, is is getting people to find these answers to things that they need, right? It's funny. If you remember, there was an old Saturday Night Live skit called Nick Burns, right, where he honestly believed that people should read the manual for things, right? And many of us in the technology industry, in our heart of hearts, believe that there's a chance that people will read the manual for something, right? But they don't, right? And think about it, we don't either. We only read the things that we need to if it's not the thing that's in our immediate field of focus, right? If it's not at the center of our attention, we're not invested enough for that. So finding that way to get them those answers is an important one. So we talked about, or you talked about, using help items to communicate. I've got an example up here. I've got a demo site, but it's using your actual help items here. That show up okay? Okay. Okay, good. So this is an example. This is not a hospital site, but I've mocked up some navigation over here on the side. It's very similar to what you're doing in there. And you notice down here at the bottom is a banner. So you want to talk through a little bit of what we're doing in these two help items? I can show them here. There's a take the tour button here too. That opens up that separate welcome tour. But go ahead. I'll cut you off there. I'm sorry.
No worries. So again, this is, and with Eric's help, we found that this might be the best avenue for reaching these users. All of them are going to be hitting their site for the first time. In fact, we put a shortcut on their desktops that sends them to their hospital SharePoint site, because believe it or not all of them hit their hospital SharePoint site on a regular basis. In fact, some of them might not even know what that is. With shortcuts and whatnot, they just may not visit that site all that often. So, but now that 365 is going to be the driver for where most of their content is, we had an opportunity to show them, here's your site, here's what it can do. And the best avenue for that, we thought, was this banner that, of course, pops up the first time, gets your attention. This is the first time their eyes are going to see it, and I think we have it showing for at least a couple days or a certain number of times. And it invites them to take the tour to show them a very concise example of where they can find the things that they might want to use or might need. So the great example of that was, and I alluded to this earlier or talked about this earlier, is we moved their file share to a document library in SharePoint. Right? This is where they do a lot of their work. If there's content work to be done, it's probably going to be in that library. So we want to highlight and show that your shared documents library is going to be here. It used to be called your iDrive. Now it's shared documents. This is where it is. And then here are some other applications, linked to applications that the hospitals use on a regular basis. We try to use that left nav for those sorts of things. But this is where you'll find most of the things that are important to you. And then, of course, as you hit next, we highlight some of the other pieces that we feel like will be important. The waffle menu. This is new for all of these users. And most of our users are F3 users, so they don't have the client versions of Office, the local client. So they need to know where Outlook is, how they can access Outlook, or how they can access Word, any of the Office applications. Of course, they don't see, we don't show them all of those, but we want them to know that to access those things, you can go here to this waffle menu. Okay, very simple. Again, trying to keep it very concise and minimal, because we only have this much of their time. So of course, the next thing is, I think we're highlighting next the help panel. Yeah. And we really wanted this to be, again, the focus for them is, look, if you're not finding what you need, give this a shot, because there's a really good chance that what you need to do is going to be at least touched on somewhere in here. And of course, even if it's not touched on, we can use those analytics to try to figure out maybe the things that they're not finding, maybe the things that we need to address. We've also got, and it doesn't, you can't see it on this site, we've got a button for M365 resources that appears. Yeah, that's the link to it. There's another button at the top, just to the right of the, oh, there it is. Oh, good. Yeah. You can't see it. All right. So, so this was the guided tour, was just to highlight these very, it's simple things, but very, very important things, and very important to the user, in the hopes that they would get a little bit more comfortable with where their content is, what they do, but also where to find that help information if they need it. And of course, that 365 resource site is it's an FAQ site for us. We a lot of carryover between VisualSP help items and also just FAQs and other videos that we have that if they have the time, let's say they're a knowledge worker, maybe they're a controller or somebody who has maybe a little bit more time to focus on the things that are relevant to them with 365. They can go to that site and dig in just a little bit deeper, maybe learn how to do some new things. Maybe they manage the site. They can learn a little bit more about what they can do with the site. So really good way to get their eyes on this, I think, but without being too intrusive or preventing them from doing what they need to do, because at the end of the day, they're coming in here to do a very specific thing usually. So we didn't want to block them from doing that thing. We just wanted to give them a nice reminder, a nice intro into what they can expect when they come to the new site. And the banner does a really good job of doing that. And I think the tour just makes it, just really drives it home and makes it very accessible for them.
Yeah, so a quick question. When you did this, so the banner, the take the tour button starts a walkthrough. So I guess you're getting analytics both on the banner, how many people are going to the page, but then also how many people are actually clicking on it, which it occurs to me is really nice. It's not kind of all in one, because you can kind of gauge that. Okay. So, and sorry if I missed this. I was a little late coming in. So, but
no worries. This is the first time we've gone to analytics. Actually.
Yeah. Okay.
But, yeah, it's a good point. You could see you can see when those individual hospital sites are launching. You can see the spikes that are happening because we're automatically loading banners for people as they get them. This is just the last 30 days here by default, but you can see here searches. You mentioned that, Rocky, right? Looking for things that people are looking for, answers that people are looking for. This goes along with, in our slide deck, we were talking about the feedback, the discussion, the back and forth that you get. If your change is a technical one, right, then where people are asking questions, the search analytics is a great place to find that. Maybe support tickets would be another, or the questions people are calling you with or asking about. I remember you mentioned that one of our calls, because when we first started out, our banner didn't say this exact thing. I remember we had one that was basically just talking about the tour. Welcome, great, and here's the tour, take the tour. And we found that we weren't getting very many people clicking the button. The analytics were showing us that wasn't happening. We were getting some people and got good feedback from the ones that did. But in turn, remember you told us that people were asking those 2 or 3 questions that the tour would have answered for them, right? If they would have clicked it, right? So we adapted, based on that feedback you were getting from people, we adapted and tried to put text in here that highlighted those couple of questions, the things everybody wanted to know on day one. If you put them in here and try to make them show up a little bit with some bold print, they're more likely to click the button. So we've enhanced this a couple of times through the process. We actually were just talking about this the other day too, and I think we're going to bubble this up a little different way. So we're going to keep doing these banners. Button opens the walkthrough. But we'll probably also add a little inline help link over here that encourages people to take the tour, right? And it only shows until they click it. Once they click it, it disappears. It goes away. But
yeah, I just noticed in the search results was the welcome tour is in there and something people had searched for. So
yeah,
not only could you do that, but you could actually just do a link that you leave up there in the navigation for welcome tour that just launches it, and just leave it there for anybody.
Yeah.
I use I love the link to help item.
Yeah, we use that a lot. It's really good. And if you look in here, you can see in the analytics, with your banners, these are the ones with this icon are the banners, right? You can look through and you can see how, and of course there are different sizes of hospitals, it looks like, right? Different sizes of user populations for each one, but you get an idea of how many people saw that banner for the date range we're looking at in here. And then you can look down to, this is our first one. Remember we said the first one, we didn't get a lot of people clicking through in there, but you can see exactly how well it's working. You can measure things very close to real time, right? You know, it's the day after, you can go look and see how did launch go, right? You know, how many people saw the banner, how many people, you know, clicked on the button, and then fine tune the communications going forward. I remember also in the walkthrough. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I was only going to say it's anecdotal at best right now, but we're finding that we get less of those questions. You know, the more hospitals we open, the fewer questions we get about that sort of thing. I think it's part of that is certainly due to fine tuning that a bit more and just tweaking this a little bit as we go. It certainly, I think, helped, and I think you know, there was a change. Originally, if you clicked on the X, it wouldn't come back, right? And now it comes back.
Right.
So that compared to our first one, you know, I think that makes a tremendous help. That's tremendously helpful as well.
That's a good point,
you know,
too,
I
trying
think
to increase the visibility. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you make a really good point there, Rocky. I feel like I've had a lot of success reducing calls and questions, and the biggest part of that is that continually refining. It's not enough to maybe just set it up, but like to really take advantage of it and get the most out of it. It's just going back and fine tuning it, updating it, and if a question has been asked, like, can you get it in there so that you don't have to answer it again? So.
And got to say huge thanks to Eric for that, because we, you know, all that wealth of knowledge and experience, you know, has really helped us to do that too. We probably wouldn't have thought to do, you know, half or more of those things, you know, without that experience.
It's been a pleasure to help, and I think it's been a good example of applying some of these strategic thoughts from communications, you know, change communications and features that map well to that in the system. And you guys have gotten a lot of value out of this. We're still relatively earlier in your migration, right? You told me, I think you said around 150 hospitals, I think you said.
Right. So we've got at least another year to go. Right now we're doing about 2 per week. We'll ramp that up to 3, but a good solid year left.
Yeah.
Question, are they on-prem, the other hospitals that you're going to?
They are.
They are.
So
go ahead.
So we will probably keep an on-prem instance for a while. That's 2019. So for the foreseeable future, I think it'll take us a longer time to. We have a few different silos. We have our hospital sites, they each have their own site collection. Then we've got our home office sites, they have site collections and so forth. Then we have some applications that we have built on SharePoint. The hospital site collections are going first, the 365. So we will have an on-prem instance, I think, for probably, I think, yes, another few years. But all the hospitals are going first, and then we'll probably start moving. We have some regional sites that go along with that too, and then we'll start working on home office sites.
So I was fortunate enough to do a migration where I had VisualSP on-prem and in Office 365. And it was so nice because, like, as I was migrating things, I could just pop up notices there and be like, your site's moving on this date. In the analytics, I could see, like, oh, nobody has been to this site. Nobody's seen the message, or who has seen the message. Like, it was such a great way to gauge the traffic. And the message, you know, after the migration was if they went to that old link, you know, your site's been moved, remember, here's the redirect, and it automatically kind of kicked them out. So I don't know if you have that. That was good times.
We do. We tackled it a slightly different way, but we definitely we could have gone that route, and I think that would have been really nice. We just chose a different path for communications. I don't control all that either. This is much bigger than just the SharePoint side of things, so I don't always get a say in what the communications are like. But yeah, that's a really cool one.
I just noticed, Sean, you've got your hand up. Did you have a thought or a question for?
I have a question. It might be more for you, Eric.
Okay, go right ahead.
We just did the exact same thing that we've been showing here. We rolled out our new intranet. We moved it from an internal SharePoint to the SharePoint Online site. So we created a walkthrough to show all the new web parts that we did and just to explain to the users what they were, because it's a whole different look. But what fascinated me, what you said is, you said something about a link that you could put over on the side that would disappear.
Yeah.
Now, is that a manual disappear, or does that link actually disappear on its own?
The link disappears on its own. I think this is the one where we did it. Let me open this one up. I staged one example like this, so we could talk, we could see it and talk about it, and we made a decision to go ahead and put this out for the others, but I haven't followed up on it yet to do that. That's my task for tomorrow for me. But
I've been
the
using
idea is
the inline button that you showed us to do several months ago, so I have that as a
right.
tour button, but a link kind of fascinated me.
Yeah, so the idea of a link is where you make the background completely transparent using this slider. So you can see the example of the button up here.
Yeah.
So you just make the background completely transparent. And if you can change the color of the text using this one if you want. We went with one of their company colors. Makes it stand out just a little bit when you do it. But if we preview, you'll see where we just place this so that it looks like it's part of the navigation.
Okay. All right. That's for some reason I thought it was like an actual link.
Oh, gotcha. So it is a button, but it's styled to look like a link. And we did this. We decided we're going to make it pulse a little bit. It's got the purple color to it, right? So it's a little more noticeable, a faint pulse to draw people's eye. And then as soon as they hover over that link, it opens the walkthrough, and then the link will disappear for them. So it's not a long-term clutter in the interface.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it could be an actual link, but it wouldn't disappear.
True.
That's I kind of got excited there because I thought, wow, an actual link that'll disappear. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So I think Pam's thought there a second ago was putting it in the, let me disable edit mode here for a moment. So if you picked one of these tours and you just copy the link here, that will give you a link that opens this page and then opens the walkthrough automatically. So you could do that. You could edit over here and add your one here, but yeah, it wouldn't disappear automatically.
Okay.
Take the tour.
We've discovered, I've created several walkthroughs for different tasks for all the new users of SharePoint Online, like how to find their site owners and things like that. And we just send them the link. It's much easier. It's like, here's a link, and it opens up the whole walkthrough and takes them through how to, click on the gear icon, click on all the steps. So it's been great.
Yep, good example. Those sharing links are really useful. Like you said, for those processes, we have it's the NHS that does it in the UK. Mm-hmm. They have a sharing audit that they require their users to go through I think it's every quarter. So, it's in OneDrive, and they can just send out or create a banner that says it's time to do your OneDrive sharing review. Click the link, and the link is one of those help item links that takes them into OneDrive and starts the walkthrough to do it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Useful stuff. Thank you. Thanks for chiming in. But yeah, this would work too. It just wouldn't disappear. You'd have to manually come and take it out of the navigation layer. But the inline help button is a pretty nice hack. It's pretty close to the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was Asa's idea, actually, making the background transparent so it looks like a link. We were having a product meeting one time talking about, wouldn't it be nice if we could do this as a link instead of a button? That's right. Turns out, well, we can. You just drag that over. Okay. Let's see. Any other things on your mind, Rocky, that you wanted to share from this? Points that you think were important from it?
I really have liked the analytics. I mean, it's one of those things that you will help, but seeing it in action has really been maybe a little satisfying, but also it's something that I was thinking about it this morning as we look to, I'd actually like to expand VisualSP to work on more of our custom applications. And so I'm in that group. You know, the manager of the custom applications group is, you know, my colleague, and I've talked to her about, you know, introducing those, and she seems to be pretty receptive about it. The thing that I'm really excited about with regard to that is the more we can get these hospital users looking for that tab, the more they'll look for that tab. You know, so whether it's in a SharePoint site or a custom application, of which we have many, you know, the more that we can get it out in front of them, you know, I mean, fairly obvious, but the more visible it will be, and the more they'll come to start looking, I think, in those places, especially as they find more value in that. So just starting to drive that adoption, you know, by expanding the role that VisualSP plays for us, and having the analytics to be able to show, you know, yes, this is working, or here's where we can improve. You know, it's just it's invaluable.
Yeah, one of the things that I like about that also is you get this kind of consistent interface between applications, like where do I go for help? And I think that that's something that is, you know, it's getting easier and easier to do with the VisualSP Anywhere. Now you can put it in your applications, and I think it's going to really transform that user experience, because, you know, people go into a different application and then they click on the help button and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't help. So knowing that that's organization information, and it's a little bit more reliable, I think it's a great point.
It kind of reminds me of that quote we had from the beginning of our presentation, right? That preserving order amid change. Change is going to keep happening, you know, on all of our platforms over time. But if you've got a help system that's consistent from each one of them, it helps to preserve that order. Even if there are changes, people know where to look, and you have that consistent experience of, we do banners for this type of a change, we do welcome tours for this kind of a launch. You know, the consistency of communication can really help to preserve that order, and therefore help people benefit from the changes instead of just survive them.
That's a great quote. I'm glad you put it back up.
So yeah, there were several. If you do a little Googling about it, this one in the middle was the one that I remembered. I couldn't actually find this one online anywhere, but somebody shared this one with me years ago with it. That was a good one. Then there was a good one from Robert Kennedy too. Change has its enemies, right? That's why communication is so important with it, is that nobody likes the change unless it was their idea, right? So even then, sometimes we don't like it. We just feel like we have to. So.
What's that other saying? Anything's possible if you don't have to take credit, which is the same thing. Like, you know, change is better when it's someone else's idea.
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely.
Or a user's idea, right? Like.
Well, hopefully this has been helpful with everybody. We will send out that follow-up email like we always do. It'll give you a link to the recording. We'll give you a printout from the slide deck, so you'll have that link for the white paper. Highly encourage you, if you don't have a background in change management, to take a look at the white paper. It's not 100 pages long. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's small enough to be consumable if you have an interest in it. I'll look real quick. It's 8 pages, so not particularly burdensome. Right? But I highly encourage that one. Hopefully this has been, and even if you just look at the highlights that we put from the presentation, that will no doubt be a good reference for you for later. Couple things to keep in mind if you're going through these changes and you need help with the lift. We do that kind of thing. Like with Rocky, it's something we've been doing in their regular calls, right? We've been, you know, planning out that strategy and making tweaks to it as we go along. But we've also taken a little offline time just once we came up with a pattern for the banner and the walkthrough of pre-staging all these for a batch of sites that are launching over the next month. So, you know, that kind of help is available. Depending on the size of your effort, the size of your subscription and things like that, there may be enough depending on what your needs are that come with that. If not, you can always buy a gift card, right? Buy yourself a gift card of those hours to do, and we make it pretty easy to do that kind of stuff, to do some of the heavy lifting for you. We've been through this kind of stuff a lot of times, so we can lighten the load and help you connect the dots. That's all I had to share. One thing I should mention just from a communication standpoint is we're making a format change next month. We've been using GoToWebinar because it helped with the registration process and some of the communication stuff and all of that. We're going to switch back to Microsoft Teams. We want it to be easier for you to participate in those. Sometimes we find, well, kind of like in this call, it was a little quiet, right? Sometimes it's just, there's just that extra little bit of friction with a platform like GoToWebinar and trying to get people involved. So we're going to go back to that. So we encourage people to turn on your webcams if you're comfortable, unmute yourself on the fly as you need to so you can participate with us. We do really want this to be a roundtable discussion, not just a presentation. We'll always have something to help give us some structure and some points, but we really want your thoughts, your feedback, your experiences, your pain, all those things, because it's more valuable to all of us when we can have those kinds of back and forth conversations. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.